The Shabbos right after Tisha B'Av is called Shabbat Nachamu, which means the Sabbath of comfort. And the reason why that Sabbath is called Shabbat Nachamu is because of the Haftarah, that piece from the prophets that's read in conjunction with the portion, and that's taken from Isaiah, this piece from the prophets in chapter 40, the first verse of the Haftarah, on the Sabbath after Tisha B'Av, and the words begin, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, comfort them, comfort my people, Yomar Elokeichem, says your God. And this Haftarah is the first Haftarah of what's known as the Shabbat Nachamu, the 7 Haftarahs that are meant to comfort us, which bring us from the Sabbath right after Tisha B'Av, right to the threshold of Rosh Hashana itself. And this brings us to question number 1, which is, what is the specialty about this Shabbos, the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av, which is called Shabbat Nachamu, the Sabbath of comfort? Why is it called that? Because the Haftarah that's read begins with the words Nachamu. I mean, not every Shabbos is called after the first word of the Haftarah that's read on that Sabbath, but this one is. This Shabbos is a special Shabbos called Shabbat Nachamu, the Sabbath of comfort. Because of the Haftarah, I'd like to know what is unique about this Shabbos Nachamu, Sabbath of comfort, and the Zayin D'Nechemta, the 7 weeks of comfort that follow this Shabbos right after Tisha B'Av. Now, on this Shabbat Nachamu, the portion that is read every single year is the portion of Vaeschanan, which is the second portion in the book of Deuteronomy, and that brings us to question number 2. I'd like to know how Shabbat Nachamu connects with the Parsha of Vaeschanan. What is the deep relationship between this Parsha and this Shabbos known as Shabbat Nachamu? And these are, believe it or not, the 2 questions that we are going to deal with this evening in Ezras Hashem. So far. So let us begin to share an idea. This is coming from the Nesiv of Shalom, written by the son of a Rebbe known as Reb Shalom Noach Berzovsky. He cites the Beis Abraham that tells us that at this period of time, known as the Bein HaMitzarim, which means between the straits. This is a terminology borrowed from the book of Lamentations. There in chapter 1, verse 3, the words Bein HaMitzarim, between the straits, are found. These 3 weeks, which are dubbed Bein HaMitzarim, are really the zenith. They are the height and epitome of our days of darkness. After all, the Gemara says in Yoma on 9b that both temples were destroyed at this period of time, and all Jewish tragedy seems to find its roots in the goings-on historically at this time of year. And right after this tkufa, known as the Bein HaMitzarim, we have the Shabbos, which follows, of course, the Shabbos called Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbos of comfort. And on that Shabbos, as we mentioned, we're going to read the portion called Vaeschanan. Why is that so? Because the Sonomer says, the Beis Avraham says that the Parsha of Vaeschanan contains within it something called Kabbalah Satorah, the receiving the acceptance of the Torah. Because where do we find Kabbalah Satorah, the acceptance of Torah in the portion of Vaeschanan? Because it's found there in the 10 Commandments. Yes, the 10 Commandments are found in Parshas Vaeschanan, found in chapter 5, verses 6 through 18. Of course, this is the second time around on Luchos Shnios, on the second set of tablets, the second set of 10 commandments. And this comes to teach us that after we have fallen to the bottom during the days of darkness, we need to strengthen ourselves to accept upon ourselves the Torah anew. That after going through these 3 weeks, the 3 weeks which are, as we mentioned, the zenith, the epitome of darkness, right after this period of time, we have to know that we need to accept upon ourselves the Torah fresh and start all over again. And we need to know that we have the ability, welcome, we need to know that we've got the ability to accept upon ourselves the Torah Mechadash, that we can start all over again. Because just like in the Midbar, when the Jews were in the desert, after the sin of the golden calf, they fell to the worst and lowest of places. That's what it says. When in Parshas Kisisa, in 32-19, when the Jews engaged in the sin of the golden calf, what happened as a result? There was Shviras Haluchos. The tablets themselves were broken on the 17th day of Tammuz. Nevertheless, although that happened, although the Jews sunk to the bottom, idolatry after all the miracles that they witnessed, and the tablets mamash were broken, right after that, there was yet another Kabbalah Torah. They re-accepted upon themselves the Torah a second time with the second set of tablets, the second set of 10 commandments, which happened on Yom Kippur. See Rashi for yourselves in Parsha Vaeschanan in 35-1. That's when they received the second set of luchos with the new set of 10 which had minor changes from the first set that happened on Yom Kippur. So just like the Jews fell to the lowest of places with the most terrible of crimes, and yet they were able to pick themselves up and re-accept upon themselves the Torah again, so it is with us every single year, that after we have fallen, after this difficult period of time known as the Bein HaMitzarim, between the straits, which commences with the 17th day of Tammuz. Again, every single year we fall into this pit of darkness, yet we have to realize that we can pick ourselves up and accept upon ourselves the Torah anew by the time this Yom Kippur rolls around, which is that anniversary for Kabbalah HaTorah HaShniyah, the second acceptance of the Torah, that we can do this again. And this is hinted to in the portion of Wed May, which contains again the 10 commandments on those luchos shniyos. So that's why we read Wed May right after the Bein HaMitzarim. Why do we read? One reason for Wed May right after this dark period of time comes to teach us that yes, we need to, and we can accept upon ourselves a second time, all over again Kabbalah Torah, to receive the Torah again, which is the answer already to question number 1. We want to know what is unique about Shabbat Nachamu? What is special about the Sabbath of comfort and the 7 subsequent weeks that lead up to Rosh Hashana? Well, basically he says because the message of Shabbat Nachamu is that we need to know. We need to be comforted. We need to know that we can accept upon ourselves the Torah again. There is a tomorrow. We can forward march even after falling to Mamish, the lowest of places, and that is the message of the Zion the 7 weeks of comfort that follow up until Rosh Hashana. By the way, just like a mourner after a tragedy, a mourner has 7 days, the Shiva of comfort. So here on the national level, after the tragedy takes place, at this period of time, we've got the Zion for the nation. We have 7 weeks, not 7 days, but 7 weeks of comfort as well. The Meser, which is the lesson, is on these 7 weeks of comfort. And Rosh Hashana is Rosh Hashana. These weeks lead us to Rosh Hashana. Rosh Hashana brings us to Yom Kippur, and on that day, historically, we re-accepted upon ourselves the Torah, the second tablets, the second set of 10 commandments, and again, the message is all wrapped up in a verse found in the second book of Samuel, in 14-14, that says, Lebilti yidach mimenu nidach. We need to know that none of us are banished forever. No matter what, a Jew can always come back to Hashem, but even after the worst experiences, the worst situations that we find ourselves in, it is possible for ourselves to be strengthened and to continue forward, march, come what may, no matter what's happened in our past. And this is the answer, Be'ezer Hashem, already to question number 2. This is the connection between Shabbat Nachamu and the portion of Wed May. Because again, Shabbat Nachamu is coming to teach us that although that we need to be comforted to know that, something, even after falling to the lowest of places, during these 3 weeks all over again, we need to be comforted to know that we can be elevated, and we can lift ourselves out of the darkness, and that's exactly where the Parsha of Vaeschanan chimes in. It shares this relationship with the Shabbos itself, and Vaeschanan again, it deals at least with, so far we have seen, the 10 Commandments, Luchos Shniyos, Kabbalah Torah, to teach us that even after falling to the lowest of places, this is the Shabbos right after the darkest period on the Jewish calendar. You know something? The Shabbos tells us, be comforted. Why? Because the Parsha tells us that we can re-accept upon ourselves the Torah. We can forward march, come what, no matter what the past has been. And therefore, the Admor of Kuvrin comes to teach us that he says, if a Jew transgresses if a Jew makes a mistake, I'm not talking about misdemeanors. Let's talk brass tacks. He says if a Jew commits even a terrible crime, if afterwards, this Rebbe says, if afterwards a Jewish person feels, you know something, I don't feel misugal, I don't feel that I have the stuff that it takes to stand before God, I can't pour my heart out to Hashem after doing what if a Jew feels that way, then I'm probably so ugly in God's eyes, He probably doesn't even want to look at me, He doesn't want to hear from me, but Jew feels that way. I can't stand in prayer after what I did, after what I said, after what I thought about. If a Jew feels that way, says the Admor Mikuvrin, that person, lo dorach al miftan hachasidus. That person has not crossed the threshold of chasidus. This person doesn't know what it means to be a chassid, what it means to be a pious person. But he goes on to say that if a person feels they can't stand before God in prayer after committing some type of crime, then he goes on to say, v'lo dorach al miftan hayadus. The Jew has not even crossed the threshold of Judaism. The person doesn't know vas meint a yid. The person who thinks that they can do something, or say something, or think something, which disqualifies them from connecting to God, that person doesn't know the ABCs of what it means to be a Jew. The person is neither a chassid, and maybe not even a practicing Jew, because the lesson is, levilta yidach, mimenu nidach, like it says there in the book of Samuel, that none of us are banished forever. That even after committing the worst of crimes, I'm not trying to encourage this, I'm saying after the fact, after a person makes the worst of mistakes, nevertheless a person has to know that we can return back to Hashem. We can always do tshuva, we can come back to Hashem, and that is the message again of Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbos of comfort. We are comforted to know that after falling to the darkest of places, which is happening during the Bein HaMitzarim that we're in right now, nevertheless, we can return to Hashem, and that's the whole 7 weeks of comfort. Reminds this to us every single, until the point where these 7 weeks, Zayin Dinachemta, 7 weeks of comfort, bring us to Rosh Hashana, which teaches us, wow, we can turn to Hashem in the Teshuvah. Rosh Hashana is the first day of Aseret Simei Teshuvah. The 7 weeks bridge the gap from the darkest of places. We can come right to do Teshuvah, return to Hashem, and no matter what, come what may. At this point comes along the Admor of Lechavitz, and he says there is an even additional twist in the translation of these words found in Isaiah in 40-1, the Haftarah on the Shabbos, or right after Tisha B'Av, Shabbat Nachamu. The words again are Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, which in English means comfort them, comfort my people. So he says like this. Another interpretation is, read it this way: Nachamu, Nachamu. You certainly have every reason in the world to be comforted. That's the double lingo. Certainly, you should be comforted. Why? Because of the next word, Ami. Because at the end of the day, you are my people. You are my nation. Like it says in Parshas Re'eh, another portion that gets left out during the Bein Hazmanim, this twilight between the times, always gets left out. In Parshas Re'eh, in chapter 14, verse 1, it says there, Banamatem Lashem Elokeichem. You, the Jews, are children to Hashem, your God. You are God's children. And like it says in Kiddushin, the Gemara there on page 36a, according to Rabbi Meir, ben kach u ben kach atem kruyim banim. Whether this way or that way, whether you sin or don't, even when you sin, you are still at the end of the day going to be called the children of Hashem, and it's a relationship that we simply cannot erase. We are, in other words, we are the children of Hashem, like it says, for example, in Proverbs, in 3-11, it says, the verse says there, Musar Hashem, the chastising of the Lord, Beni, my son, al tim'as, do not despise. So what is an alternative reading of those words? It goes like this. Musar Hashem. Do you know what God's Musar, you know what God's message is? The next word. That next word is Bini. My message is to you, you are my children. It's something that you will not be able to change. You simply cannot erase the fact that you are a child. At the end of the day, is a child, and therefore, Nachamu, Nachamu. Why should we be comforted? Because Ami, we are the Am HaNivchar. We are the chosen people. You know why we're the chosen people? Because we are the choosing people. Anyone that asks you, why do you think you're chosen? Because we chose Hashem. When God went around to all the nations, like a peddler trying to sell his wares, would you like my Torah? Every nation in the world slams the door in God's face. No, not interested. The Jewish people said, Nasa v'nishma, we will do, we will hear. Come what may, we don't care what it says there, we accept you. So we said yes. So because we are the choosing people, Hashem reciprocates and chose us back. The doors of choosing are open till this very day. Anybody today that wants to choose God, then you can do so. And God will choose you back. This is something that is for all peoples across the globe, but the point is, because of the way it is right now is for the most part, the Jews are the ones that chose Hashem, therefore we said yes to God, therefore Hashem reciprocates and chooses us back, and that's why Nachamu, Nachamu. We should be comforted to know that therefore Ami, we are the Amma Nibchar. Now that we chose Hashem, Hashem chose us back. And after those words, what does it say there in Isaiah? Yomar Elokeichem, which means to say that Yomar, this will be said in the future. Yomar, what's going to be said? Elokeichem, that no matter what, I am your God. The point is, this knowledge alone, to know that there's nothing that we can do to change this deep and intimate relationship we've got with the divine, is itself enough to strengthen us, that even after falling to the lowest of places, yes, we can strengthen ourselves. We can lift ourselves up, and therefore we have to know that we can't change the status of being Banamatem, and therefore Hashem is in a constant state of choosing us. Hashem's arms are always open, and this is already a lesson in a combination of the Shabbat Nachamu with the Parsha of Vaeschanan together. But now at this stage, let's move on. It's not just that after the darkness we can achieve and obtain the light. It's more than that. It's really deeper that within the darkness, the light itself is hidden. In other words, darkness is something which is an absolute necessity in order to achieve and obtain the light itself, because the light itself, we're going to see, is actually hidden within the darkness. As we go on to say there in Isaiah, in chapter 45, verse 7. Listen to this verse. It says there, Yotzer or uvorei choshech. I, God says, I form the light and create darkness. Osei shalom uvorei ra. I make peace and create evil. Ani Hashem oseh kol eleh. I am the Lord that does all these things. Now, on this verse, many thinkers and philosophers have questioned. It says here in Isaiah that God says, uvorei ra. I create evil. Many thinkers, many philosophers have questioned, wait a second, how is it possible for God, who's known as the Makor HaTov, God is the source of good, and God is completely good, how does a completely good God create evil? Or ask it the other way around, how does Ra stem from Tov? How does bad come out of someone, something which is so good? This is a point of contemplation of many thinkers and philosophers over the ages. So the Slonimer here shares with us a few ideas, and he says like this. First of all, on the first level of things, evil is an emtsai. It's like a conduit. Evil is a way in order that good can be felt. To appreciate the good, we need there to be something called bad. And because the bad serves as this contrast, that through the fact that we have something called Ra, and we can appreciate the other side, which is Tov, therefore there is a Tov within the Ra. There's something good about Ra, and that it serves a purpose for this contrast. Just like, for example, just like without darkness, we would never appreciate the light. We'd never realize if we'd only have light. We know nothing other than light. We would lose the appreciation of the importance of light. So darkness, which is the contrast, brings to us the beauty and the need of the light in the same vein. Without the creation of evil in the world, if we just had Tov, we would lose the appreciation of Tov. So therefore, Ra, evil serves a purpose in contrast, on this level alone, that we can now come to appreciate the good. And therefore, on that level, the Ra is actually good. If the Ra brings out the Tov, and we can appreciate the importance of the Tov, there is a Tov within the Ra itself. But it's even more than that. Says the Slonimer Rebbe that it's not just by means of contrast, that the darkness brings to the light, and that the evil brings to the good, but it's even more than that, that there is light buried within the darkness, and there is good buried within the evil. And he gives an example. Take, for example, a seed. You plant a seed in the ground, everybody knows that it rots. It turns to an almost nothing. It seems to be what a terrible thing in the life of a seed. Terrible thing. It rots to almost a nothing. It dies. It disintegrates. It seems to be destruction. It seems to be a terrible thing, but we all know, although it seems to be then on the outside, that very rotting process is the beginning of what's known as growth. That itself, what appears at first to be death, what appears to be destruction, itself is the first stage of real growth, and therefore so it is when it comes to darkness, when it comes to evil. They themselves give birth to the light and to the good, and therefore darkness and evil are innately good. In other words, there is light buried within the darkness, and there is good buried within the evil, like we said last week. We mentioned in Matos Maseh the whole idea that from the outside it appears to be evil. It's a mask of evil. It's a veil which seems to be dark and dismal. But really, when you peel away the layers, you find out in the lowest of places is contained the highest of things. Welcome. Amen. So, from the lowest of places, we find the highest of things, right? From the darkest of places, we find the greatest of light. It's kind of the same thing that we pick up this week, where we left off this year from Matos and Maseh. And if you look at Brias HaOlam, look at the creation of the world. The Zohar points out that Chashocha v'hada nahora. First there was darkness, and then there was light. That's what it says. Take a look in Parsha Vaeschanan in chapter 1. In verse 2 it says, "V'choshech al pnei tehom," and there was darkness over the face of the deep. And then only after that, it says in verse number 3, the next pasuk, "Vayomer Elokim yihi or." The Lord said, "Let there be light." So the Zohar makes the observation at creation itself, darkness precedes the light, and it comes to teach us not only that from the darkness can we appreciate the light, not only does darkness bring us to the light, but within the darkness, the light was buried in the darkness, and the light is an outgrowth from the very darkness itself. And therefore, we are not going to be shocked when we find verses like I'm going to share with you right now in Parsha Vaeschanan in 1-2, when it says there, "V'ha'aretz hayasa sohu vavohu," at the time of creation, it says, "And the earth was tohu," which means without form, vavohu, and void, v'choshech al pnei tehom, and darkness was on the face of the deep. That is how the Torah describes the chaotic state of the world before it all came together. There's a midrash on these words found in the Breshus Rabbah in 2-4 that expounds on this verse, and it dissects it into its various parts to be discussing, as Reish Lakish says, of the Galios, the various exiles. The midrash says, Reish Lakish, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Pasar Karya B'Galios. The famous Reish Lakish, this sage, interprets this verse to be talking about the various exiles the Jews had to suffer over the ages. For example, he says that when the verse says Tohu, the earth was without form, says Reish Lakish, Zeh Galus Bavel. That word hints to us to the Babylonian exile, which was a place without form. When it says in the next word Vabahu, the earth was void, says the Midrash, Zeh Galus Madai. That refers to the Median exile. When it says V'choshech, and there was darkness, Zeh Galus Yavam, that refers to the Syrian Greek exile. And when it says Al Pnei Tehom, on the face of the deep, says the Midrash, Zeh Galus Mamlechas Harisha'ah. This refers to the exile of the wicked kingdom of Edom, that of the Romans. Now, when you see this midrash, which interprets the opening, the second verse in the Torah, already you have sown into creation, according to the midrash, sown in that these Galios are going to happen. It makes a person, any thinking person would ask the question, wait a second, why did God already predetermine that these exiles were destined to happen? We haven't done anything wrong yet. Why is God already punishing us with exile? We haven't done any at the time of creation. You ever hear the expression, "Give me a break, I just got here"? Well, try this one on precise. cut me a break, I didn't even get there yet. Even before we get there, and God knows the future. So fine, if God knows the future, why bother with creation? But if God is going to play ball with us, with time, give me a break. He had to set into motion, predetermined, put into motion. Golios, even before we give us a chance. We just to breathe. We cut, that's it, you're going to exile. Why? What's going on? So basically, the son of a Rebbe says, one approach to address this question is that, what is the Tachlis HaBri'ah? What is the point of creation? He says the whole point of creation is something called tikkun. It's all about fixing, getting fixed, repairing ourselves, and so on, correcting ourselves. And these four galios are really viewed as four grand opportunities which bring us to the Olam HaTikun. It brings us, we get fixed along the way by going through the various tzaros, the various challenges and the difficulties from those very testing and challenging moments. That's where the Yeshua, that's where the tzmicha, the salvation stems from. That's where growth really takes place. Sonober says, Golus, exile, was not a punishment because we didn't do anything wrong yet. These exiles are merely ways of bringing us to the tikkun. They are ways and ofanim to bring out the good that's buried within us. Sometimes the good is buried deep down, in the darkest of places. You don't even see it. But sometimes, because of certain situations, we are forced to flex them spiritual muscles right there. And we have to come to terms and take the bull by the horns and face the music and begin to operate and things. It brings out the good. The point is, Chevra, the good is buried right there. In the darkest of times, there is so much good in there. So much good grows. There's so much growth from those very difficult situations themselves. And again, this is not shocking because we've just seen that idea that was mentioned before. And you know something? It's not just at the beginning of creation, in general, that Hashem hinted to the four exiles, but in the beginning of the Jewish people's existence specifically, we're going to find again these four exiles were coded in and already hinted to us from the very start of the Jews as a people. Because we know that Avraham Avinu, the founding father of our people, the first Hebrew, Avraham Avinu has a prophecy by the bris bein habesarim, by that special covenant between the pieces of the animals, and Hashem and Avraham take this stroll right through the pieces. There was a prophecy that Avraham received at that time, and in Parshas Lech Lecha, in 15-12, it describes what came over Avraham Avinu at that time. It says there, V'hinei, and behold, Ema chashecha gedola nofeles alav. There was a horror of great darkness that fell upon him. Those are the words the Torah chooses to describe what came over Abraham when he was now going to see the future. Of course, that future was about Golus, because the Midrash there as well, found in the Bereshis Rabbah, in 44-17 says, it dissects this verse, it takes it apart as well. Says the Midrash there, when it says the word Ema, that there was a horror that came over Abraham, says the Midrash, Zu Bavel. That refers to the Babylonian exile. Here we go again. When it says Chashecha, there was darkness, Zu Madai, that refers to the Median exile. When it says Gedola, there was a great darkness, Zu Yavan, that refers to the Syrian Greek exile. When it says Nofeles Alav, that fell on him, Zu Edom, that refers to the Roman exile. Here we have again, right there, here we have the beginning, the founding father of the Jewish people. He gets his prophecy, and right away, exiles are again conveyed to Avraham Avinu prophetically. Your descendants are going to go through these exiles. So again, one can ask the same question, cut me a break. We didn't do anything yet to deserve. Why is God already punishing us with the exiles? And yet, again, says the son of a Rebbe, the same answer. The purpose of creation is something called tikkun, to fix ourselves, to correct ourselves, to repair that which is broken. And therefore these galios, these exiles, are actually opportunities. The difficulties that we face, they are tests that we go through in life. They bring us, they mold us, they shape us, they bring out all that good. And therefore the good, which is buried, which is dormant, sometimes laying deep, deep down in the darkest of places, actually comes to surface through these darkest of places. Comes out from all this that there is no Ra, there is no evil that stems from the source of good. The question was, Hashem says, I create evil. And the thinkers, they ask, how could the source of good, how can a completely good God create evil? The answer is, when you kind of look at things in this way, there is no real evil that stems from the source of good. It's the word that we use to describe difficult situations, because that Ra is really a gift. As bitter as it feels, it is really a positive thing, and therefore there is no Ra. It's a word that's used because that's how we relate. We associate these things as being Ra, but in fact, they are really very good things, which bring us to the tikkun that we are going to appreciate forever after accomplishing all the things that this quote-unquote Ra brings us to. The Ra is really Tov. The Tov is within the Ra. It grows from what you and I call Ra, like it says in Psalms, in chapter 91, verse 15, Imo Anochi B'tzara. God says, I will be with him in trouble. That doesn't mean that God's going to get in trouble with us. It means that when the person is in trouble, when a person goes through troublesome times, it says, Hashem says, I am with the person in those times. And that we can really tap into Hashem. We can really connect with the divine in those very dark places. So again, the lesson, for us is every Jew needs to know that when we go through these darkest times in our personal lives, and we all have stuff, we've all got baggage, we've all got situations going on, each one in their own way. It's a very broken world. We have to realize that from the most difficult and challenging of places, we have to realize from that darkness, there is so much light in there. And there's so much growth from those very places, from those very situations. Like it says in the most beautiful verse in Psalms. It's found in chapter 139, verse 8. Listen to this one. It says in Psalms, Im esak shomayim, if I ascend to heaven, sham'ata, there you are found, Hashem. But then it goes on to say, if I make my bed in the lowest of depths, hineka, behold, you are there as well. Whether I go to the highest of places, I will find Hashem there. But it tells us in the second half, even if we make our own beds, we got to sleep in, and we make our beds in the lowest of places, hineka, behold, Hashem is there as well. In the lowest of places, in the darkest of times, like it says in Parsha Yisrael, in 20-18, Moshe nigash el ha'arafel. It says Moshe drew near to the thick darkness, asher sham Elokim, where God was there. This is at the receiving of the Torah. At the time Moshe went on high. So what does it say there? Moshe went into the Arafel. There are 3 levels of darkness. The first level is called Choshech, which translates as darkness. The second level is called Anan, which translates as cloud. The third level is called Arafel, which translates as thick darkness. And each level is darker than the one that precedes it. And what does it say here? It says, Moshe nigash el Arafel. Moshe entered into the darkest of the dark. He went into Arafel, the thick darkness. And yet, what does the second half of the verse say? Asher Sham Elokim. God is found right there. Where can you find Hashem? You can find God in the thickest of darkness. And that is an eternal lesson for us. That something, when we go through sometimes the worst periods in our life, we've got to realize Asher Sham Elokim. God is right there. If we can find God somewhere, then by golly, we can find Hashem right there in the darkest of situations, at the most challenging of times, right there. We can mamish find Hashem and connect with Hashem in like the greatest of ways. And therefore, there is a story which I think drives this point home. They tell the story about the Admor of Kuvrin. When he was on his deathbed, he was surrounded by his family and his Hasidim. He said the following things. He was about to leave this world, and this great Hasidic master said, I see coming before me right now all the days of my life. He could see them. All the days of his life, they're flashing before his mind, and he just saw every single day for it. And he said, he commented before he left the world. He said to his Hasidim, he said to his family, those days that I see right now, that I thought were my highest days, now I see them for what they really are. They're just in God's book in God's measuring stick, they're just average days. But then he said, and now those other days that I thought were my worst days, my lowest days, the days of most difficulty, now I see them for they really are. They are the most luminous days. In God's book, those are the highest. Those are the holiest. There's the greatest light on those days itself. And the reason is because within what we think is darkness lies the greatest of light. That's where the greatest growth takes place. That's where we connect with Hashem in the most incredible of ways, and therefore, Gavalt, this Chevra is the Bechina, the essence of the Bein HaMitzarim. We've got here this period of time known as between the straits. It commences with the 17th of Tammuz and concludes with the 9th day of Av. And this Tkufa is known as the 3 weeks.